Great to be back at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. I am particularly honored this morning. We have had what I am quite confident is the most intensive week in history of U.S. congressional engagement with Ukraine, with the Ukrainian government, and with the people of Ukraine. We've had two very large leadership delegations that have been with us here in Kyiv. The larger group met yesterday with President Poroshenko. Today, I'm particularly honored and delighted that we have with us Chairman Mac Thornberry, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. So that is the branch of our House of Representatives that is responsible for everything having to do with defense policy and defense appropriations. Chairman Thornberry is here with his own large delegation, has had an intensive program that has included meetings this morning with the defense minister. We just finished up with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, also saw President Poroshenko, saw Chairman Nalyvaichenko at the SBU, and has had a good opportunity to review where we are in terms of our bilateral partnership with Ukraine and the support that the Obama administration has committed to standing with the Ukrainian people as they continue with this remarkable process of transformation and defending their sovereign territory. So Chairman Thornberry has agreed to take some questions, and I think we'll also have the opportunity to hear from other members of the delegation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Again, my name is Mac Thornberry. I'm from the state of Texas and am privileged to chair the Armed Services Committee in the House. As part of my delegation is Congressman Mike Rogers from Alabama, Congressman Tom MacArthur from New Jersey, Congressman Steve Knight from California, and Congressman Seth Moulton from the state of Massachusetts. We are taking advantage of this time to travel in Eastern Europe. So we have just come from Romania and are going to head to the Baltic states as well as Poland in the coming days. We have spent portions of 3 days here in Kyiv, meeting, as the ambassador said, with various government officials, including the president and prime minister, as well as meeting with some people who are not in the government, and actually had the opportunity yesterday to tour the museum on Holodomor, the Great Starvation, which occurred in this country in the 1930s. I think these discussions have been very useful for me. I have a better understanding of the security situation today in eastern Ukraine, and also the many different sorts of challenges that this country faces economically, as well as with the refugees in a host of areas. I believe that there is a great deal of support in the Congress, in both parties, in the House and the Senate, in support of providing additional assistance to Ukraine so that it can defend itself against this aggression. There continue to be discussions, of course, in the United States on what more makes sense, but I think the other delegation that the ambassador mentioned, as well as our delegation, will help our colleagues in Congress to understand the situation that this country is facing and to help move those discussions forward. So that will certainly be our goal when we return to Washington in a few days. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
One second. Radio Liberty, Mikhail Stekeler. What kind of additional support can you provide? Radio Liberty, Mikhail Stekeler. What kind of additional support can you talk about? Can the U.S. provide? I asked experts yesterday, and they say that the position of President Obama as to lethal weapons can be related to other foreign policy, like related to Yemen and other countries. So that's why he doesn't want to spoil the relations with Russia.
that the President has not yet decided whether he supports providing additional defensive lethal assistance to Ukraine. But I believe there is a great deal of support in Congress, in both parties, in both houses, to provide that assistance. So there are still discussions going on. I think that every day that the Minsk II agreement is violated tells us something about whether one can accommodate Russia or not. And obviously these are discussions that we continue to have with other NATO allies, but I believe there is a strong majority of people who support providing defensive lethal assistance. And we had a vote just last week in the House where the vote was overwhelming to support that. And so I believe that's the opinion of most Americans, most people in Congress, and I'm hopeful that the President will agree with us soon.
Я бы хотел все-таки уточнить, связан
I would like to ask you, maybe the position of President Obama is related to other international conflicts where Russia is a partner of the US, that's why he wouldn't like to spoil relations with Russia. And that's why he doesn't provide illegal assistance, lethal defense weapons to Ukraine.
Well, I can speak for the President, of course, and I don't know all of his reasonings. I have discussed with some administration officials various concerns that they may have. But while it is true, there are many serious situations going on in the world at the same time, I believe none of them are more important than what is happening right here in Ukraine today. Because this aggression threatens the stability of countries, not only in Europe, but if this is allowed to stand, it threatens the stability of countries throughout the world. It threatens peace, people being able to determine their own destiny, making their own decisions for themselves. So this is, I think in many ways, the most significant threat to peace and stability since the end of World War II. So there are other things happening in the world, but none are more important than this.
I have a question about the cybersecurity. Were there discussions with the Ukrainian counterparts on strengthening Ukraine's capabilities in terms of cybersecurity here? It's a big issue.
Yeah. Well, it is one of officials have provided to us to have secure communications so that they would better be able to operate in the East and elsewhere in the country. Certainly the United States can help provide more secure communications of various kinds, and I hope that that is one type of aid that we can provide in the future that would assist the Ukrainian military and security forces to be able to operate around the country.
Anna Honcharek, Ukraine Crisis Media Center. That all the important political decisions in Kyiv are indeed made in Washington. And visits such as yours can also be presented as instructors coming to teach someone here. So can you really explain whether any decisions were made and whether you advised something or it was just negotiations, discussions, and so on?
Well, I have to smile when anybody suspects that members of Congress or others from the United States can tell a sovereign country what to do. If the Ukrainian people have proven anything over the last year, it is that they are determined to make decisions for yourself and will not be told by anybody what they must do or what they cannot do. And I think that fighting spirit of independence that the Ukrainian people has shown is one of the most admirable things that I have seen on this visit as well as in other conversations we have had in Washington. We are partners resisting together a common aggression. And in the past, whether it was the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, it has been a partnership of nations who have worked together to resist this sort of aggression. And I think that's what is required again today. At the museum we visited yesterday, they had an exhibit which talked about some assistance that the United States had provided for a famine in the 1920s. So we have helped Ukraine before. I think we are helping Ukraine today, and I think we will help Ukraine more tomorrow. But it is helping as a partner where we share common interests versus any other sort of idea that the propagandists may want to put out.
May one more question. Vitaly Senko, Information Agency. You already mentioned about assistance that you already provided interested in. My question is to get some more details upon if there are some preconditions or conditions you expect from Ukrainian side authorities in order, for example, to increase this condition, like to strengthen cooperation in order Ukraine can get more, in order to improve military defense or in other directions in this case.
Yeah. I do not think there are any conditions. I think some of the discussion we have had has been with the military and other officials about reforms that are taking place to help the Ukrainian military be more effective. And so I think the conversations are more what would be the most helpful for the United States to provide in the way of weapons and training and other forms of assistance given the threat and given the current status of the Ukrainian military. So I don't think there are conditions, it's just a question of finding the right match for the circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Елена Савчук, Press TV channel. Well, how did this trip and meetings with Ukrainian leaders change your vision on the situation in Ukraine? And what will you tell other American lawmakers when you come back to Congress?
Anybody want? Well, I'll tell you, I'll invite my colleagues if they want to add what they want, what their impression is, what they might want to take back. One of the things that I will take back is the fighting spirit of the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian people. So this has been a very difficult situation when you face a military as big and powerful as Russia, and you face the deception, the lies that come out of Moscow about what is happening here. And so I have been concerned that the Ukrainians would feel alone and discouraged, but that is not what I have found. I have found people who are willing to fight for their country, and that is very admirable. As someone mentioned to us, they are willing to fight a tank with a knife if that's all that they have. And that fighting spirit is what has made, I think, the Ukrainian military much more effective so far than most people would have expected. But it is also the thing that I think will be the most important factor moving ahead in countering this aggression in the East. I don't know if anybody has something else? Yeah.
Good morning. This building was built as a museum to Lenin, with a legacy of oppression and violence and deception. And here it is now a place for free discussion and freedom of the press. And so what I'll take back to Congress is a sense that Ukraine is committed to democracy and is pointed to the West, to the rest of Europe, and to civilization, and that Ukraine deserves America and Europe's support in every possible way. That's what I'll take back.
Тетяна Пасова, газета «Голос України». Скажіть,
So, will you please tell me, is there any kind of red line? If Russia crosses this red line, maybe the United States will pass a decision to deliver, to supply Ukraine with lethal weapons in this case, if the Russians cross this conditional red line.
In my opinion, Russia crossed a red line when they invaded Ukraine, when they occupied Crimea, when they continue to send tanks and Russian military personnel into eastern Ukraine. I think the red line has already been crossed, and that's the reason I believe strongly that Ukrainians ought to have the ability to defend themselves in their country. And that is the argument that I will make in Congress, and I think most of our colleagues agree with that point.
Just a brief question about the further sanctions on Russia. There are many representatives of the Russian political establishment who enjoy their time in Miami. They have their assets there, they have their deposits there in the banks. Are there any discussion to actually put further sanctions on freezing those assets in the United States, as well as in your discussions with your European partners?
Yes, there are discussions to further tighten sanctions against Russia. But for those sanctions to be effective, they have to be done in concert with Europe. And so that is some of the discussion that is going on. It is possible that those of us in Congress may want to move out on our own if we tire of waiting on the Europeans to all agree. I don't know for sure, but it would certainly be more effective if we can all agree. And my impression is that if we continue to see violations of the Minsk agreements, that the Europeans and certainly the United States will be more likely to add to the sanctions against Russia, and I think that would be appropriate.
Can you specify the results of particularly this visit to Kiev? As I understood, you've met Poroshenko, you've met our Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. I'd like to hear, and I suppose everybody likes to hear, what are the results of your day here? What have you achieved in these talks? Thanks.
Well, in meeting with all government officials, we were able to get an update of the situation in the East. So, for example, we met with the OSCE and were updated on what they are seeing every day, and as well as with Ukrainian government officials. So the weapons that are coming into the East now, for example, we got an update on that. And then we were able to ask our questions directly to key government officials, questions that we have heard from our colleagues, and develop a better understanding for what the government here is trying to do, not just in security, but in other areas as well, anti-corruption, for example. So I think we come away with a better understanding of what the situation on the ground is, what the government is trying to do, and the importance of U.S. assistance in various kinds. So I think it has been very helpful for me to have had, as I say, portions of 3 days that we have been here to carry on these discussions.
Mr. Thornberry, as well as the honorable delegation, thank you very much for taking your time to visit Ukraine. We wish you the fruitful rest of your stay here and have a safe flight back. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.